Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Palumbo. Today is August 12th. It's 6 o'clock. This is the Pleasantville High School Wellness Reopening Team. We're meeting to discuss all the work that we can do in the coming weeks and throughout the beginning of the school year to support students, not only academically, but socially and emotionally. Got a great group here today. I want to thank the parents, teachers, students for joining us. Mia, big shout out for being here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your leadership. And I'm looking forward to talking about some of our progress that we've made over the course of the last few weeks. Before we begin, I was thinking that I might give you a kind of a broad overview, some big things that have happened, some decisions that have been made, and I would then kind of start some conversation around some opportunities. I know that Dr. Mancari has some great information to share about our advisory program and things that we're looking to do in regards to Steps A. Obviously, any other new ideas were welcomed and we are excited to potentially implement. So about 10 days ago, we submitted a plan to the New York State Department of Ed that included a model for instruction. It's the September plan. I want to be really clear about that. Any plan that we submit is not a plan for the entire 2020-2021 school year. I fully anticipate that we'll roll our plan out, that we will learn as we go, that we will make changes, and we will continually strive to improve whatever services that we deliver. The plan that we submitted for the month of September is a hybrid plan. In the news today, you might have seen that Suffern just opted to go all remote for the first month of school. You know, some bigger districts are having a real hard time figuring out how to make this all work, given the timing of everything. You know, luckily for us, we've been working on this for the last 2 months. We don't have a 4,000 person school district. We've got facilities that will allow us to do a hybrid model, and we're looking forward to starting with that in September. Just a real quick overview of the model. The model is a two-group model. I'm not going to use the A and B groups anymore. I'm moving away from that. You might have noticed in my document that I pushed out last week, because we're going to have a rotation of days, and the rotation of days is A through F. So I don't want to confuse the A day with the A group or the B group. So we're going to do group 1 and group 2. Group 1 is in the alphabet A through L. Group 2 is in the alphabet M through Z. Here's a quick overview of the week. Monday will be a synchronous day of instruction. That's live instruction remotely for all students. Those are for the 2 Mondays that we have in September. We will make a decision about those synchronous Mondays in October based on what we learn during our first few weeks of school and any guidance that we receive before October 1st. Those Mondays are important because it gives the teachers an opportunity to connect with all of their students. The teachers will be following the bell schedule as if they were in the building. Some of our teachers will be teaching from the building. Some of our teachers will be teaching from home, but they will all be teaching live for all of our students. Students in group 1, A through L, students in group 2, M through Z. Tuesday through Friday is where things get a little bit different. So on Tuesday, group 1, A through L, will report to school for in-person instruction. They will follow their 9-period schedule. They will move about the building. They will go home at the end of the school day. Group 2 will be home, and they will be working on some asynchronous instruction from their teachers. That can include a variety of things. That can include videos, that can include Nearpod, that can include voiced over PowerPoint presentations. You know, one of the things that we heard from students yesterday, and I'm still racking my brain around this and trying to figure out how we could make it work, is they talked about, Mr. Palumbo, could you just try to please build some more structure in for us? So that's something that we heard. And Mia, you know, you were at the meeting too last night. We're going to try to work to make that happen. But I'm unable to make the teachers available live simultaneously for 2 reasons. The first reason is they're working with the students who are in the building. That's a pretty good reason. And then the second reason is that from a technology and instructional standpoint, we do not have the ability at the moment to Zoom kids into the room as students are working with their teachers in that in-person model. That might be something that we look at as the year progresses. We are in, not in talks, but we've put in work orders with the Lower Hudson Regional, that's the Lyric, BOCES. We do that work to our network. We may be able to expand our capacity to beam out live at some later date, but right now we do not have the capacity. There's also a good conversation to be had from a teaching and learning standpoint, whether a person in the classroom can adequately divide her or his attention between the people they're working with in person and the people who are at home. You know, do you take away from both groups in a model like that? So that's something that, you know, we'll be discussing. And like I said earlier, we're a learning organization. So, you know, based on what we learn in September, we may make some moves there. That rotation that I described on Tuesday will continue on Wednesday. So that group that was in on Tuesday goes home on Wednesday, and the group that was home on Tuesday comes in on Wednesday. And that happens on Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Friday. So if you are in group 1, you're in the building for in-person instruction Tuesday, Thursday. If you're in group 2, you're in the person for instruction on Wednesday, Friday. We are currently working to finalize the rotation in terms of days. The biggest impact with the days is on science labs. And of course, we do not have concrete guidance right now about how flexible the state will be with science lab minutes and what type of labs we can actually do, given the fact that we're striving to maintain social distance whenever possible. So that's a bit of an evolving situation. We're going to be updating families as soon as we can. Most common question that I've been receiving over the course of the last 3 days, Mr. Palumbo, could you please describe to me what the full remote option would look like for a family if their children cannot come in because they are either, they have a pre-existing health condition, there's somebody at home who does, or they just feel uncomfortable. We're currently working to devise that model. The superintendent and the building principals hope to push out information on Friday, Monday the latest, so that families can review that information next week and then make a decision about their plans for the upcoming school year. At the secondary level, you can imagine that simultaneously running a in-person program that's hybrid and a fully remote program that contains all elements of a child's schedule is a pretty daunting task, which is why I can't easily say, well, this is what it is. So we're working very carefully to make sure that we develop a model that's meaningful, that supports students. And, you know, again, I'll go back to that guidance piece. We have not received clarification from the State Department of Education around the requirements for that model in terms of instructional minutes, live instruction, all those types of things. So we're going to get out ahead of it when we release that information on Friday and Monday. We'll then probably hear from the state at some later date, and then we may have to adjust our thinking, which has really been par for the course over the course of the last 5 months. We will play on, we will do our best, and we'll plan to support students. Important information about the calendar. This hasn't been released yet, but we worked with the Board of Education to do this work late last week, early this week. We're going to have the new staff in on September 1st for their orientation day. Our superintendent's conference days are going to be, and those are for the teachers, they're going to be on September 2nd, September 3rd, September 8th, and September 9th. That's important because it includes 2 extra days of training for the teachers, which we've already started during the summer months on the new learning platform, Schoology, that we'll be using throughout the year. The plan for the first day of in-person with our students currently is September 10th. I say currently because in 2 states that neighbor us, Connecticut and New Jersey, the governors at the 11th hour pushed off the openings of schools. I don't have information that that's going to happen here in New York. And I can also say it's happened in other states. So that's why I'm saying just be prepared, you know, because that type of thing could change. What I would like to do, and I started the conversation with my school counselors today, is think about what we could do during those first few days of school to really onboard students. And I'm looking at my calendar now. The 10th and the 11th are a Thursday and a Friday. Those are our first 2 days. So we're going to be looking at doing some significant orientation work. I had a conversation with Jackie earlier today, Dr. Mancari, and we talked about looking at homerooms for students and doing some work, you know, in our advisory model there. and then potentially, not potentially, because we already have the commitment from our physical education teachers, continuing the Steps A work for students in grades 10, 11, and 12 as part of our PE curriculum, and then continuing in grade 9 with that full curriculum that we've been discussing. So I was going to ask Jackie, maybe if you could give the group an update about the training that we're in discussions about for the staff, and then the subsequent program, around that advisory model.
Yeah, definitely. So I think in our last planning meeting, I mentioned cognitive behavioral consultants who already do some consulting work with us within the psychology department, and the fact that they're doing some consultation with schools around this more universal social emotional support for students based on the same program that we've been doing with our 9th graders. So the thought is that they can actually help support the content of what we're doing in advisories, because I know that teachers will want to hear from them who've been doing this kind of work on how to be able to have certain conversations with students. I think they'll be able to be really specific about what the role of a teacher is in an advisory, that it's more of an instructor, and certainly not a counselor, a therapist. There's a set of skills that are being taught, and there's conversation around it, but nothing that's like the conversation you'd have in a counseling group. So that's what we're looking at. And I think just the last point I'll make is thinking about how that's introduced when we have a little bit of a better idea of what that'll look like in the schedule to students. So that's why I'm glad that Mia's here, because I know that the advisory model is something that students ask Mr. Palumbo for. So we want to be really clear on how it's introduced to students. And also, Claire, I know you mentioned the last time we met also the introduction of that to parents as well. So I think that if we go forward with this, the orientation will be a great opportunity to kind of frame it for folks, parents, students, and really teachers as well.
All right, so when we were discussing about training for teachers, and I had this conversation with Dr. Mancari earlier today, what she's going to do is reach out to the consulting group that we're in conversations with, and we're going to plan some training for teachers on one of our 4 superintendent's conference days, maybe 2. We're going to look and see, maybe we break up 2 shorter sessions as opposed to 1 longer session. I kind of like that from an adult learning perspective. I think you get more out of it because it gives you an opportunity to become immersed, walk away, think a little bit, and then kind of dive back in, with some new questions. And also it breaks up the learning, which, according to adult learning theory is the way to go. So, we're really interested to plan that for the teachers. And then we can look at those school days when we get back. Then, Claire, another thing that you brought up that we obviously want to maintain, a focus on is the balance between the core mission around education and the SEL work that we're doing. We certainly don't want to lose, a significant amount of valuable instructional time, that we have, doing this work, throughout the year. So we're going to, strive to create that balance. Based on some of the conversations that I've had since our last meeting, it seems like the best practice, is to start in person, and then we might transition to use maybe some of those asynchronous days, for the work once you develop the relationships, but that seems to be what I've heard, from the schools that have implemented it successfully, that you certainly want to start out in person and then maybe look at doing things remotely, down the road. Dr. Mancari, does that sound like consistent with what you've heard, or?
Absolutely. And I'll also add too, because I know Daniela, we spoke about this the last planning meeting, and obviously Melanie's here as well. Kind of the idea of a teacher learning a new curricula when there's so many additional demands can be pretty daunting. And I think that this is a nice balance, because it's not a teacher teaching a full period of Steps A as you guys have seen it in the past. It's a shorter period of time within the advisory. So it's more of a stepping stone. And I'm sure there will be a learning curve, as with all new things. I think it's a less intimidating learning curve than, hey, here's a full period of your class that you need to teach this Steps A stuff.
have missed it, but did you say it's going to happen during homeroom? I think
That's what we're thinking to start. Yeah. And I have to say too, I have a strong suspicion, that, we're doing this work, and some might say, oh, Joe, it's going to be like another thing. I feel like this is going to be a thing that's unavoidable, because as students transition back to the building, we're going to notice behaviors. We're going to, get engaged in conversations. Kids are going to have questions. They're going to share their experiences. So I think this is all kind of part and parcel to us coming back to the building, developing meaningful relationships, and really supporting one another, as we continue to live through what are very, difficult times. We will never know all the things that people are experiencing on their own, but everybody is, to some extent impacted, by what's going on around them. So I think this is a real important, strategic investment of our time and our resources.
And I think there are a lot of, pretty nice research points even too that can be just put out there as part of the introduction of something like this. So again, Claire, to go back to really being thoughtful about how it's introduced to parents. I mean, the research is out there on how kids are struggling at the moment. So, I can even start to pull some of that together just so it's there for us to share with folks.
Yeah, that's been an interesting conversation in town around, the K through 6 versus the 7 through 12. There are a limited number of districts, in Westchester and Putnam counties that have gone full remote for their high school and full in person for K through 6. As the building principal, I could never support a plan like that because, like Dr. Mancari said, there's a lot of research out there. I've had conversations with students and families. Our kids at the 7 through 12 level, they need access to their teachers and that social connection, just as much as the students in K through 6 do. So, in that regard, I'm very happy that the district has adopted a plan that's equitable, among the grade levels, and that our kids will be in the building.
I just had a quick question to clarify, Jackie, real quick. So the 9th graders are going to continue the Steps A in English classes, correct?
Yeah, and I think, Daniela, what we should do is hold a little bit of a planning meeting. And my thought is that on those asynchronous days, when students are at home, that would be a great opportunity for us to use that time in a live way to connect, with those kids with Dana. So, as we start to think about that asynchronous day, what I'm trying to think of in my head, and Mia was there at the meeting last night, is how do we create those live connections and build in some structure? Dana's the perfect example of someone that could do that type of work because she's not going to be in school teaching live with students, when the other group is not in the building. So, and that also, it preserves your time that you have in person, and Melanie in the social studies departments as well. So I think that's really a win-win in two regards there.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a nice use of time. I mean, in the spring, Dana still prepared those PowerPoints and we posted them, but if she could be present in some way, I think that would add an extra piece and an extra section. It's hard for the kids to just, view the PowerPoint and then, we're kind of depending on them to do all the independent piece.
Yes, I'm going to talk to Dana about going live. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's a nice idea and a good use of that remote day, I think.
We don't have the captive audience that you have in school. So you have to get really creative about how you package and sell our services, because the kids have choices. Do I turn on the computer? Do I not turn on? I can't dispatch Greg Fondy to chase them around the house and make sure the computer's on. And no parents that I've spoke with want to work as assistant principals in their home. So we've got to be very creative. It's a mind shift. It's definitely a different paradigm for us to think about, how we connect, and that goes back to that relationship piece. And I think the research says that students are most likely to respond well to adults that they work with in school or in the community when there is a relationship there and you've got that social capital. So
absolutely, even more so than their parents. They really don't want anything to do with us during the I mean, from my experience too, it's they really just don't want anything to do with their parents during the day. They want to feel that they could handle it on their own, and they need that connection to other adults. It's so important.
So Jackie, as far as the steps A for 10, 11, and 12, I'm curious, when you speak with Alicia, do you think you might bounce off the possibility of doing something with those PE teachers, either before those superintendent's conference days or during those superintendent's conference days, like a breakout thing with them?
Yeah, I think she would probably want to do some breakout stuff just as part of the training anyway, because she's talked about that being a little bit more effective. So I think it naturally makes sense that if the PE teachers are going to be implementing it, that she can do something separate with them. And even, potentially have Dana as a part of that as well,
Yeah.
just so that there's consistency.
Good idea. Mia, from your perspective, the students, like the adults have talked a lot. Is there anything that you're thinking about that we might do to help, that would support you, that would make you feel more comforted coming back to the building, being in classes, connecting with your friends?
Like you said, I just think establishing those relationships are super important, because we're not going to have the same social relationships with our friends, because, so just as much as we can to like going in as a freshman, and I had like a normal beginning of the year, it was just really important to me to know upperclassmen, know people in my grade, know teachers, because that just made whole transition really easy.
I spoke with
Mia, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Mia, you're reminding me that we actually wanted to get some of our students involved in this Steps A work. And even I'm thinking, like, in the context of an advisory within homeroom, you might have some student ambassadors, like students who are in sources of strength, for example, like just get involved in that, because I think, right, Mia, it's a little bit better to hear it from people in the school, your peers, right? Like, than a teacher sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I was just going to say that I spoke with Joyce Connell about it earlier today. And, given that we have the calendar now and we're looking at the orientation program specifically for our freshmen, we're going to look to do some of that mentee model. And we're going to capitalize on those students in sources of strength, and maybe put a note out for other students to volunteer to kind of get some students involved in that. Jen, I know that you talked about some strategic partnerships
Yes.
and the possibility for that. Are there any particular groups that maybe you want to share information about?
So this is based on some really positive comments on Facebook, believe it or not. Few parents reached out looking for possible support groups within the community for students that are having just a tough time overall, with everything that's going on and going back to school and such. And kind of the opposite of what we were talking about with the advisory, more of a place where there would be a licensed psychologist, somebody licensed with a small group of kids getting together either in a park, like social distance, or on Zoom. So this is all just kind of took place like in the last 24 hours. So two parents are interested in helping out. And I don't even know if it would be something that the school would necessarily run. I'm thinking, to obviously tap into Break the Hold and Pleasantville Strong, but would love to get any of your opinions or ideas on how, because our biggest question, especially in this group too, is like, you could provide these services. It's getting the kids to kind of want to be there and want to do it and feel, comfortable enough to join. When you get over, a certain age, it's really hard to just be like, all right, I'm going to sign my kid up to, join this meeting or this group or whatever you want to call it. So, that's my question to you guys. If you have any ideas about how we can go about doing it. I mean, it's something we could even bring Jan and Jeanette into and help with the mindfulness piece of how, they can implement their skills in terms of like having anxiety around returning to school and kind of have that all intertwined into some type of program. So I don't know. It's kind of just all ideas right now. But Paula had some really good ideas today. On a separate note, on the asynchronous days, is tapping into all of our community partners. For example, the library, because those are going to be the days where say you're going to be in school in person on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So you have that Wednesday and Friday as an asynchronous day. So tapping into community partners like the library and Wendy Freed with essay writing and kind of different ways kids could step away from the computer for a couple of hours and have some type of, schedule on those days instead of just being at home for, several hours and taking a break for lunch, kind of breaking out and things that they would actually sign up for and go to. So that's another thing that we're thinking about from a PCO perspective. Like I'd love to see, a blast from the PCO to the entire high school community saying, okay, look down the list and click on these different opportunities that the kids will maybe have during the week on those days where they're home and learning, on their own. So that's another thing that we're kind of thinking about and working on how to implement. So really just wanted to know if you guys had any ideas around the student support group idea. And
so we run groups during non-COVID times. The difference is that during the non-COVID times we're always struggling trying to figure out how we make them work and fit because of all the different schedules that kids have. I think that the asynchronous day offers us a unique opportunity because kids have much more flexibility on that day when they're not in the building, perhaps for us to look at some of those groups and get them off the ground. Because the hard part on a typical Monday or Tuesday, when we're in the building 1 through 9 with all of our kids, is that all the kids have different schedules and competing priorities. On our asynchronous day, I think we could really, leverage that flexibility and maybe look at some of these groups, based on feedback that we get from students. So maybe we devise a tool to get some of that feedback, and that can be part of our introductory to the advisory model. And we use that feedback to develop, some groups based on what we hear from the kids, because we can have the greatest ideas, ever.
Right.
for adults who are imagining what it's like to live through this. But I think if we get feedback from students, we can really create some tailor-made experiences.
Yeah, I think we need buy-in from the students. That's the main,
Yeah,
sorry,
that's what
Jackie.
I've always found. No, I'm sorry. I've found that with counseling groups, when they're kind of billed as counseling groups, students might not have as much of an interest. So it is hard to get the buy-in. I think though, and we've talked about this before, if we're providing some sort of group experience that's maybe more like things we've done in the past, like I know Mindy Hill has hosted like game, after school activities, and she orders pizza and things like that. Obviously that won't look the same as it used to. I think you might be able to get a little more buy-in there, and it certainly doesn't replace the counseling groups. And if there's a need, I think, and an interest, I think we should go ahead with that. The other stuff, just a fun group gathering might be something, virtual gathering might be something we think about.
Well, and that's the key too. So Dr. Mancari mentioned this earlier, even with the advisory model, we're not going to ask people to focus as teachers to be social workers and school psychologists. We're going to ask to listen and then kind of redirect. So that's a great opportunity for us to get more referrals, and perhaps follow up with students who might need services that we might ordinarily not know about.
Right. So it's something that I envision as like doing that on the asynchronous days, because that obviously won't be mandatory, where the advisory groups, if you're going to introduce them in homeroom, then it's mandatory, right? Like they'll
in person. Yeah, that's why is the best practice is to do that in person, because you have access to all the kids. They can build the relationships. We can start that way, and that's how you start to get some of that buy-in.
Yeah, I mean, that could be something. So I don't know. I mean, I reached out to these two parents. I said that, we should definitely set up some type of, time to just discuss it and throw some ideas out there and be able to offer something on those asynchronous days. I think would be really great. And especially if they're offering, and we have so many resources that we can tap into in this community. Like, that's what's different about Pleasantville. It's like, you have Jan and Jeanette, you have Pleasantville Strong, you have so many, and then also others that we don't even know of that I'm sure would be willing to volunteer to run a group. So, it's definitely something to discuss and look into further.
Right. So maybe like an action step here might be, and Dr. Minkeri, I would rely on you based on your clinical background. Like, what might be some good questions or tools, or that we might use to gather some feedback from students to maybe put some of these things together. And then maybe we sprinkle in some ideas about some fun activities they might be interested in with some day-to-day needs that they might have. We kind of, ask both types of questions.
Yeah, and even advisory. So like advisory, fun group activities, and then touch on whether there would be an interest for more of a counseling group kind of experience, support group or counseling group. Yeah.
I think that's great. And I think so. So one other question too, backing up for a second. On the asynchronous days, I know it's really hard to say like how many hours the kids would be working, but do you think that they're going to have enough, that they're going to be on for like 6 hours? I mean, so will they be time for them to kind of break out and like maybe go to an outside gym class or something just to kind of get them away from the screen for a while and back? I know it's just going to be hard because you want them to be on some type of routine, like get up at 7:30, get breakfast, have breakfast and kind of get to work. But it's going to be really hard.
That's a difficult balance because, the feedback I've received from, the superintendent and, parents that I've worked with and even students, well, Joe, like there isn't 180 extra school days in the year as a result of this crisis. So explain to me how you're going to cover the curriculum associated with a particular course in the time that you have. And to your point, Jen, if you're working on those asynchronous days, you might still run into some time conflicts there. So I think that's something that we have to, kind of play by ear. We'll learn about as the year progresses. I think the volume of work will be different for each student. The rate at which they complete the work will be different for each student. So that's something that we've got to keep an eye on. And if we notice trends around availability, we need to look at scheduling things strategically so that students are available, when we put events on the calendar or schedule groups, those types of things. Are we still live? Oh, got quiet. Okay. I wasn't sure. All right. Any other ideas, comments, suggestions, things that we should think about that maybe we haven't mentioned yet?
So the one thing I think that we might sort of tie into what Jen's talking about too, in terms of trying to put stuff into the days that the kids are working from home. I think you're going to have a lot of kids looking for some release or something to do if sports are canceled. I think that's going to be a huge void for a lot of kids, and that maybe that's the opportunity. That's another time period where if they were naturally used to breaking at that time period, maybe if you have some of these activities that you're talking about during then, I mean, I'm fingers crossed, going to be very unhappy in my house if there's no sports this fall, but I'm not overly optimistic that that's going to happen. So, I think that maybe if you can come up with some of the, whether they're taking an outdoor yoga class or, something, if their community partner is willing to volunteer to fill the void, what's normally their release from school is by doing some activity, whether it's a club or otherwise, or sports, maybe that's another time period that you could try and work something in there. I mean, I'm also mindful of, at least with the high school students, you don't have the, people can walk to something so that their parents aren't totally disrupted if they're working, as opposed to some of the younger kids. But depending on where you live in town, we don't typically walk from where we are.
I
That
get
could
the same thing up on the mountain here.
so as much as I'd like to, it's not well received around here. But I just point that out because I think there's going to be huge fallout if the sports go for a lot of kids, both emotionally and just in general.
All things for us to think about. Try to put this puzzle together, and make it work for students. That's our goal. So I'm gonna end our meeting. What I'll do is I will hang around. If anybody wants to stick around and talk or has some questions, I'll be here to answer them. We're gonna do our next steps that we talked about with the consulting group around training for our teachers. We're gonna look to secure those training days. We are going to plan out those orientation programs and make sure that there's an SEL component, based in that. And then, back to the feedback that we've received from students, we're going to look at that asynchronous day and see what type of activities that we can build in there. And then obviously there's the piece with our PE teachers who have been very eager partners to do the steps A work. So I'm very excited about that. They, jumped on it this year before any of this started, this past year actually. So, we'll look to continue that and hopefully get them some additional training too. So I want to thank everyone for participating this evening. I hope you have a great night. And like I said, I'll stick around till everybody's gone. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
All
You're
right,
welcome.
thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks, Joe.
Hi, Mia.
Thanks,
Bye.
Joe.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe, I have one quick question for you. What are you guys doing about band and chorus? I read the frequently asked questions, but are you really going to hold them or?
Yeah, so what we're going to attempt to do, and I'm going to be working very closely with John Verchese and Nadia Rizzo, is we're going to be looking to utilize the outdoor spaces for those offerings as much as we possibly can. I'm going to really push the envelope, in terms of, going outside, in all different types of cold, hot, because Dr. Sothoff, who lives in town, and he's on our health and safety committee, he shared a story about in Europe, how they had a super spread, based on a choir that people were involved in, and just the very nature of projecting your voice really is a risky activity. So, that's something that we're going to look to do outside in as safe of an environment as possible. And, I'm hoping that that's a reality. There could be some, changes, between now and the start of school around, those types of programs, but and maybe we have to do some of it virtual, but we're going to try to be as outside as much as we can.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, I will tell you that the ARC Stages has done a great job with using the masks. Try to think, they're like visors essentially. They're plastic, and so when they had singing this summer in their camp shows, they used that as well as an additional protective feature. You can get them on Amazon in like packs of 5 for cheap, but they protect, they keep the spit sort of even closer. They still are socially distant. Yeah, they go all the way down past the chin, but they're just plastic. You'll see them, the doctors wear them in the hospitals, but it actually made me feel better about, letting somebody do that, because I had the same reservations about the singing. Now, of course, that's a much smaller group of just 7 kids, but I don't know how you deal with that with a major course. I think if you broke them down into sectionals or something, you might be able to put them outside with those on and keep it smaller, but.
Yeah, and that's Dr. Sothoff's primary concern, is that if you talk about like the possibility for aerosol contraction, even if the spit goes down, it still becomes airborne. So, we've got to be really careful about that and think about it and put the plans in place kind of as we go. That's why I'm very curious. We're going to do the split in classes next week because we've been working to kind of balance some classes. We'll do that as part of the release of our schedules. And once I have the numbers, I'll then be meeting with John, who directs the band, and Nadia, who directs the chorus, and we'll be working. Now, Nadia, who directs the chorus, is very tech savvy. So, she's going to be using all types of online tools. Kathleen, that wasn't her biggest area of strength, technology. But I think Nadia, is really going to look to harness some of those tools and do some different things as well.
Yeah, I mean, because I think that's a legitimate concern about, and I say that as kids who really love their music classes, but
Yeah.
I think the spread is a legitimate concern. I know that the Caitlin plays in an orchestra, the Westchester Youth Symphony is trying to do a lot of their stuff, I think, virtually this year too. And I think that as much as you can use the tech is probably a good idea, but I know that, at the same time, kids probably are eager to,
Connect.
Yeah. So I was just curious what you guys were going to do.
And many of the high school principals that I know, one of their first reactions when, we were starting to conceptualize what the year would look like is, oh, well, we'll just do the core in school and all the electives will be at home. But then the guidance document, talks about, working to make sure that you provide in-person experiences in the arts, both performing and in the fine arts. So, it's something that we're committed to doing, and we just got to make sure we hit the mark in terms of doing it in a safe way.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Have a great night. Take care. Hello. Okay.